most abortion-minded women, I think it's like 76%, it's because they don't have support from their partner or their family, and so they feel like that's the only real option that they have.
I think everybody who's pro-life would say, I think adoption is preferable to abortion. But adoption is hard. It's often expensive. There are a lot of legal barriers. It's difficult for birth moms to want to choose to have their child adopted. But what if adoption were accessible, affordable, and filled with support on both sides? What if women in crisis were met with real help, not judgment, and hopeful families didn't have to navigate the journey alone? Well, in a culture wrestling with the value of life and the meaning of family, there's a bold vision that is taking shape. It's reshaping the conversation around pro-life, and we're going to talk about it today because the love of Christ, faith, compassion, and action are coming together to expand what it means to be pro-life, to include adoption. My guest today to talk about this is Heather Mellott. She's the founder and president of Adoption Finder. I'm going to give you the website for that right now because in the intro and when we're done with the show, I'm going to mention it. But it's really important that you find out about this organization. It's adoptionfinder.org. You thought I might say .com. I didn't. It's not .com. It's adoptionfinder.org. And you can email Heather, the guest of this show, at any time, just at info@adoptionfinder.org. So since launching this organization in 2019, Heather's been on a mission to make adoption more accessible, more affordable, to support women facing unexpected pregnancies, to care for foster youth, and to save lives from abortion. She, like we at Summit Ministries, believes that every life has intrinsic value and purpose, but her work is really practical in helping make that happen, to help families be built on love and hope and lasting support. So let's welcome Heather Mellott to the Truth Changes Everything podcast. Heather, welcome to the Truth Changes Everything podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation because we're going to be talking about pro-life adoption. Summit Ministries is a deeply pro-life organization, but I don't remember if we've had a show where we talked about all of the issues surrounding adoption. You're the perfect person to come and help us with this.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about what we're doing and how Christians can really dive into the pro-life adoption side of things.
Why don't we start with you just telling a little of your story, how you got into this this kind of work, what the name of it is, because I think people are going to be wanting, we'll kind of reference that throughout the show so that if people want to get in touch with you, they can. But yeah, just give us a little of your background. I mean, how did this become a big issue for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, growing up, my parents had fostered kids while they were married. And so I think at a young age, I kind of saw that that was something that was important. I ended up having kind of a hard, broken childhood after my parents split up. And so God was able to use that hurt to bring goodness and glory into my story, and that's trickled into a lot of the work that I do. He gave me a heart for orphans and widows, and it's something that has come into Adoption Finder, obviously, and in the pro-life movement itself. We wanted to create a ability for more affordable adoptions that are less profit focused. A lot of agencies are for profit, and in a lot of our research, we saw that that is a huge barrier for families. And so that's one thing that we focus on, as well as just helping foster youth and helping women in crisis or in situations where they feel like they can't choose life. And so all in through that, God's kind of weaved a story with mine, but also with a heart for his people.
Yeah, so you have a heart for families that have had trouble. And I can see how that translates right into a heart for moms who are in a crisis pregnancy situation. How does Adoption Finder help both the mom and the adoptive family. You mentioned that there's often a big price barrier. I didn't know, I guess, until just this moment that the adoption agencies were for-profit companies.
Yes. Absolutely. And that's not every single one to say. There are like Christian adoption agencies out there that I think are doing great work. But there are some agencies out there that I've heard stories from adopting families where they're like, you have 24 hours to pay us $20,000. You were matched with a mom. If you don't pay us that, then we're moving on to the next family. And so I don't think, for one, that's very ethical. It's not allowing the mom to be part of the story. It kind of puts a lot of pressure on her. And it's not really honoring her wishes. We've helped some families throughout the US save upwards of $40,000 by helping create identified matches. I think the statistics, like 2% of women in crisis pregnancy will choose adoption. So there are those things, but honestly, we believe that even if a mom is empowered through our program to choose life and raise her baby, that's a huge success. We just provide the adoption side of things as another option for her, and try to show the dignity of life of that child as an image bearer of God. And so that's kind of both our success in our eyes, and we try to meet them and support birth moms, because I feel like it's, a very hard area. There's a lot of trauma that goes into all of it, and so we try to educate families and help them maintain, if they choose like an open adoption, that they uphold their word as well, because there have been cases of that too. It's a broken and messy situation, and we're just trying to bring God into it.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful for that, Heather. In your experience, Heather, what's going on in the mind of a birth mom when she's thinking about adoption or keeping the baby or having an abortion? What are the things that are stopping women from saying, I think adoption is a good choice?
So, research is showing one thing is the woman in the situation is thinking about themselves. They're not actually like connecting so much with the baby, if that makes sense. It's
Hmm.
very like self-focused. Like, what am I gonna do? Um, you know, what what is gonna, like, I if I can't raise this baby, no one's going to. It's a very interesting logic that's going through all of that. And so when they're provided support, like most abortion minded women, I think it's like 76%, it's because they don't have support from their partner or their family, and so they feel like that's the only real option that they have. And then it comes down to, like, what am I going to do? I can't raise this baby by myself. Like, I'm in college, or, there's all of our culture just screaming, like, do what's best for you. We live
Mm.
in a culture that's very much self-focused, what's convenient, what's comfortable, and we hear it a lot, my body, my choice, and that bodily autonomy. And so when we are able to counsel them and show the dignity and worth and value of the child, and letting her know, meeting those fears that she has, like, you will be okay. You can, have your career. You can do these things, these obstacles. Yes, they sound so big and scary, but we're here to walk with you through them. You're not alone. Those things are helpful for us to be able to change that mindset from, fear and letting kind of the enemy overwhelm them, and helping them walk and choose life.
Yeah, I love that answer. I'd love for you to take us through a little bit of the conversation of what it might sound like, because I think there are probably a lot of people who will be watching and listening to this show who are in this exact situation at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, typically, like when we do an intake, we have a form that they fill out, and that kind of helps us know better the situation, right? Like, there's some hard questions on there, like if, the pregnancy is due to rape, what kind of situation living are they in? Because there is also, from the pro life movement, one of the biggest arguments we hear is, well, what about abortion in situations of rape, right? And it's less than 1% of abortion is due to incest or rape. And so that is like one of the biggest holds I feel like the enemy has on women in society is like, well, that was a traumatic, awful situation. They should be able to choose. But it's like, well, now there's three people involved. The victim, the woman who endured such a horrible, tragic thing, the man who did that, and then an innocent child, and they shouldn't pay for that. And so we kind of go through their whole intake form. We get a better understanding. We can have a call with them. A lot of times they like to text too. So we do a
Hmm.
lot of texting back and forth, and we kind of just get a feel for their situation and how we can support them. And we offer prayer, we offer biblical resources, whether that's Bible study stuff. We also just are incorporating a new program through Able Moms to help women walk through their different curriculum. And I think that's going to be so great. Um, but yeah, we're able to just see their and hear their story, right? Because that's how you're able to really connect with people. Just telling them they're loved, that their baby is chosen, that they're not going to walk through this alone if that's something that they express. We pray for them and we show them that we are really being the hands and feet of Jesus by providing tangible support, not just, prayer and thoughts, but we're actually meeting those needs and they're seeing that like being fulfilled that, oh yeah, they are really walking with me. They are really helping. They are providing things that um, I need to actually feel supported and like I can do this. And we hear time and time again that they're so grateful for support and they feel like they actually can do it. And we try to walk with them even up to at least a year, if not longer, and just be an open line and resource. We'll provide diapers if they need it and other supplies as well, because, it doesn't just stop at birth. It's how do we help them and empower them and teach them so that moving forward, they can continue to grow and support themselves in a healthy way.
Heather, how does adoption come into that conversation? Because I mean, I've not been in this situation, but I can imagine a young woman thinking, I would be a real failure if I gave birth to a baby and then gave the baby away, and I would for the rest of my life be wondering what happened to the baby and all of that. How do you talk with young women about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. It's not so much that's definitely something I think in the last like I'd say 30 years has been a huge thing. Like they feel like they're a failure or that they're giving up when in reality they're choosing life and they're demonstrating a tremendous amount of courage to be able to do that. And so we try to break down the myths about adoption. And we have written, I wrote this in our adoption checklist book that we just released and kind of helping like people walk through like pregnancy centers and churches and stuff too. Um, that those are misconceptions that's not reality. um if they we try to hear them out though and understand like why they would feel that, and then we try to bring in the truth, right? So like the enemy's really good at like twisting things and making things sound like truths when they're not. And just pointing to the actual value of the child, that it's not just a legal process, it's a redemption of God's heart for everything. And um, I think validating their feelings too, even though it maybe isn't a truth, is also helpful so they feel seen and heard.
Hmm. Yeah, I can. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you for walking through that. I'd like to talk about the adoptive family side of this as well, because when you focused initially on Adoption Finder, um,
Mhm.
it just reminded me that I feel overwhelmed, and I think a lot of people do, and discouraged by the
Yeah.
brokenness that's in the foster care system, uh, the barriers to adoption, and I would love for you to just talk about that a little bit. I think a lot of people believe adoption is too hard,
Yeah.
that this is going to work out poorly, that this is disruptive to the family and so forth. And so families who might otherwise be open to inviting a child into their home would feel very reluctant.
hmm Yeah, that is very true. There is an emotional side of things where people feel like they're not capable of it. And I try to always remind them that, like, this is a child. They need not just a home or a place to stay, but they need a family. And when we can kind of remove those stigmas or misconceptions of like what we've seen on the news, because the news, it really likes to doomsday everything, and see them as image bearers and as children that need love and support. Um, we're trying to help in doing that, educating families and helping walk them through that, because really it is a hard and messy thing. I know a lot of families too that don't like the idea of having to um, let the child go if they are in foster care, and like having them go back to their family. But that's, I think, a misconception about foster care as well, is it's about reunification, right? And typically a child spends 22 months in foster care before they're either told that the parents' rights are terminated or that they can be available for adoption. And so having the mindset of like adoption and foster care is ministry, right? It's not so much about us. It's like, what can we do to be a vessel for the Lord in this awful situation, right? Like a lot of kids get pulled out of their house and sometimes in the middle of the night, and all they have is a trash bag full of their stuff. And so bringing in the compassion of things, um, it's, we're able to model the gospel when we're able to do those things. And that's one of our goals at Adoption Finder, is to be able to educate people and really teach them like how much of ministry this is, right? It's hard. But Jesus can equip us, and if he's called us to it, then we're able to do it. And we always say that if you're not called to adopt, you are called to care. So you
Mm.
can advocate, you can volunteer, you can donate, you can do all these other things to spread awareness or help connect people with the ability to meet those gaps. I think there was a statistic that I looked up before our meeting, and it was really encouraging. It said the number of churches in the US, it's approximately 355,000 congregations. And when you compare that to um, the amount of children that are available to be adopted, it's 370,000. And so imagine if like more people stepped up in the church and was able to do that. But encouragingly enough, um, almost two times as many Christians are likely to adopt or do foster care. And so that's really good that the church is stepping up in those areas. But I know that there really could be more. Whether it's, providing a meal for a foster family or advocating through like your vote. There's so many different things that we could do on the regular basis to help bridge the gap.
Everybody's talking about Gen Z and what's going to happen with Gen Z. Wouldn't it be interesting if Gen Z researchers actually put together a report about their own generation, what they are thinking, how they think, how social media affects them, and how to reach them with the truth? Well, that's what we did this summer. Along with two Gen Z researchers, we put together the State of the Rising Generation. Now, I put mine in a little binder. I'm going to tell you in a second how to download your copy for free. But in the State of the Rising Generation report, you're going to learn what is happening with Gen Z, the influence of even things like AI. You have no idea how AI is changing the way those in the rising generation think, and then what it will take to reach them with the truth. All you have to do to get a copy of this for free is go to summit.org/risinggenreport. Summit.org/risinggenreport. Download it. Share it with your friends, share it with all the teachers you know, the pastors you know, and the parents you know, because it's critical that we make these connections with the rising generation to reach them with biblical truth. So there are really two things that could happen maybe as a result of our conversation today. And one is that families I think we feel called to be involved in this process, to be a foster family or to adopt a child. But also pastors who can stand up and say, we want to be completely pro-life. And that's going to mean potentially that God's going to call some of the people in this congregation to adopt a child or to temporarily bring children into their home. This is not a decision that they make all by themselves. This is something where we as a church need to step up. We need to provide meals, financial support, whatever is necessary, because this baby in many ways is being adopted into our entire community, not just into that family.
Absolutely. And healthy churches will try to advocate for things like that, because that is really the gospel, right? Like, we were adopted into God's family through Jesus, and we can do the same thing by being the salt and the light and going out into the hard, messy places and bringing that light of Christ. And it's definitely not easy. There's a lot of brokenness in the system, but when God calls us to something, he will equip us through it. And so keeping that in mind, that you don't have to do it in your own strength, like, it's going to be hard, but it's not impossible. God will see you through that.
Mm-hmm. If a pastor says, I'm compelled by this, I want to have these resources available for people in my congregation, what should they do?
Yeah, they can reach out to us directly. We're making all kinds of curriculum available, and it's in the works. We have our adoption readiness checklist that can be provided through churches, or families can order it on Amazon or through our website. And we're happy to provide those resources, or even meet with churches and have kind of like a coaching session on how that can look for them. And we're happy to train as well, and just talk about and open up the conversation to see what God will do for them and for their church and for all the families that are interested in that.
I love it. And thank you for providing that. I think that's going to be really helpful to a lot of people. As we're talking, I can really sense a biblical worldview at the heart of everything that you're talking about, wanting to be biblically focused rather than just, life, self-centered, we're doing our own thing, we're doing our own lives, kind of focus. Can you talk a little bit about what biblical assumptions counter some of the broken assumptions that are out there about adoption specifically?
Yeah. Well, like I had mentioned earlier, God calls us to care about orphans and widows. And so I think, like, when he's very specific about things, his heart is there. And so he has called us to go into those broken areas. I think remembering to, right, Romans 8, we have been adopted into Christ's family. And so that should compel us to share the good news and go do the work that God's called us to do. Adoption is not charity, it's discipleship and ministry. And so
Oh, that's
it's
good.
modeling the gospel of
Yeah.
Christ.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
good.
And I think when we like renew our mind, right? Because our culture has said a lot of things about adoption and foster care, but really seeing it through the lens of how Jesus would, it changes your perspective, right? Like when we help women in our program or children, we are living out that story of redemption that God's wrote into creation, right? And everyone is invited to be a part of that gospel story. And so, whether it's like actually adopting, whether it's doing respite, because there's also respite care for adopt or for foster care, where you can give foster families a break, but without committing to a long term part of foster care. You can donate clothes and different resources to all the different foster agencies around. You can become a CASA, which helps advocate for children who are in the system. I was a CASA for 3 years, and it was very eye opening what was going on, especially during the height of COVID. So many people were afraid, and so they closed their homes or they withdrew their ability to be a foster family. And so there was children sleeping on the floor at all these different locations, and it was just sad, like in caseworkers' offices and stuff. And so those are the areas I think that we're called to be the light and not live with a spirit of fear, right? And so I hope that encourages people today when thinking about that.
Yeah, thank you for pointing out the fact that there are a lot of options available, that everybody can do something. We can
Mhm.
donate food, clothing, money, um, time to
Yeah.
take children for a weekend, to give a foster family a bit of a break. There are all of those kinds of things that people in churches could do as well. I think this is really insightful and helpful, and I just love to hear some stories. I'd love to
Yeah.
leave people with some tangible examples of how the work that you're doing, you're seeing the impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that comes to mind was we had a family create what's it's called an identified match. So they didn't typically use an agency to create that match. They used our platform to connect with a woman who was wanting to place her child for adoption. And they connected with her through our group, and they actually lived like 7 miles away from each other. Like
Wow.
the odds of that, right? Like God was just in that story. And they decided to do an open adoption, which has become way more popular over, the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, just having more openness,
Yeah,
which I
explain
think
what
is
that means,
great.
because I've heard that term before, but
Right. So open adoption just allows for there's different levels of it, but it allows the birth parents to be in contact with the child and the family. And so they can write letters, they can send pictures, they can have phone calls or FaceTime videos, or even meet every once in a while. It just really depends on the terms of what the family and the birth parents are um, like okay with. In the past, a lot of closed adoptions were the standard, I feel like. And that I feel like left a lot of adoptees with kind of unanswered questions about their health. Like they can't even get medical records, which could be kind of hard if there's, a health issue, even, or just there's this sense where they felt like unwanted or, just hurt. There was a lot of trauma there. And so having that openness kind of allows for healing to come in. And the birth parents can express, like, no, we loved you. This was the best choice for you at this time of our life. Like, we still want to be a part of it, but it allows for healing to come in. But this specific case, the birth mom ended up delivering at the hospital that the adoptive family, the mom there, she was a nurse. So she actually got to be
Wow.
like a part of everything. Yeah. And through that process with the identified matching, we were able to help reduce the cost of adoption by over $40,000 is what the family said. And the goal for that is, right, removing those barriers, making sure children are taken care of, and birth moms are also loved and respected through that. We were able to provide maternity clothes for the birth mom and other necessary support that she needed through that, through our generous donors. And yeah, we're just so thankful that we could walk with them through that. And it's amazing to see that God brought that all together. Like, they were so close, and they still had to go through the legal process, right? Like, you need a lawyer to do all the legal things because that's just ethical and right. We follow the rules, right? But we're just removing those extra layers of barrier that families often come into contact with. Sometimes people take out loans and just do things like that just because they have such a desire to have a family. There's like, on estimate, over 2 million families waiting to adopt. And so we just want to remove that barrier. And so it's beautiful when we get to see stories like that.
Hmm. That is a beautiful story, and it's possible, Heather, because of the work that you and your colleagues are doing through Adoption Finder. You're lowering the barriers that, especially the financial barrier that a family might experience if they want to adopt. But you're also ministering to the birth moms and helping them value adoption. And you're doing it all with a heart for a biblical worldview. And I think the curriculum that you're writing, especially things that are going to be helpful for churches in this
Mhm.
process, are so good. Let's just make sure we keep this conversation alive as part of the overall conversation about what it means to be pro-life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to share about the work?
Um, I think that it will never end, right? There's always going to be something for us to do. But I think there's a lot of hope in seeing a better shift in our culture towards valuing life. I think we've seen that in the last 3 years, specifically after Roe v. Wade. Um, Recognizing, right, that life begins at conception, that every child is known, formed, and loved by God before the world meets them, and looking at people as not like numbers, but as individuals with stories that God loved and has a purpose for. And so, doing this work, remembering those things, I think it helps us have a lot more compassion and want to keep fighting the good fight.
Hmm. Heather, thank you so much for coming on the show today. So we're going to, in the closing, we're going to make sure that people know how to reach out to you, how they can take advantage of the services that you offer through Adoption Finder. And let's just pray that God takes that spirit of adoption that we have been given in Christ and then applies that to a world that's very much in need right here in our own prosperous country.
Absolutely.
Thank you to my guest, Heather Mellott, for coming on the show today. I want you to check this organization out to get more information. Go to adoptionfinder.org. It's not adoptionfinder.com. It's adoptionfinder.org. And you can email Heather with any questions that came up out of this conversation at info@adoptionfinder.org. Now, this podcast is brought to you by Summit Ministries. And at Summit, we partner with the rising generation, with their mentors, their parents, their influencers, so young people can know God's truth and become champions of a biblical worldview. If you want to learn more about Summit Ministries or access the resources that we have that help young people in your life embrace and share the truth that changes everything, well, just visit summit.org. We'd love to help you there. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.